Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the Bloomington City Council meeting on May 10th, Development Services Manager Jackie Scanlon gave an update on accessory dwelling units and plexes.
We reported in February of 22, September of 22, and since September of 22, the department has had 11 additional inquiries about possible duplex uses in the R1 through the R3. As last time, these inquiries range from basic questions about whether or not one is allowed to process questions to proceeding with filing. A dwelling duplex use was approved via the conditional use process by the Board of Zoning Appeals in October of 22, and a dwelling duplex use was approved via the conditional use process by the Board of Zoning Appeals in February of 23. So that is a total of 3 since the regulation was passed. We have also received one ADU permit filing since September of 22, which leaves our number hovering around 30 for those since that regulation was changed. And we wanted to let you know that we have put together an accessory dwelling unit website, and that went live on April 11th. So that can be accessed through the Planning and Transportation Department website. It has a number of model ADUs done by local and regional architects and explains the process for both attached and detached ADUs. And I can answer any questions.
Councilmember Steve Volin asked if the regulations are too restrictive and if that is why they had not had a lot of requests. Scanlon responded.
Is it the opinion of the department that the rules may be too restrictive, that they're discouraged? Is there a reason why people aren't even building 15 a year?
I'm not sure. I think we were comfortable. I mean, we were definitely comfortable with the cap. We said publicly, we're not going to get 15 a year. Feel free to put a cap on. That was not something we would argue against. As was the case when ADUs were submitted, I think it's just a slow roll start. I think having it be a conditional use probably does slow that option. We had a fourth, we discussed this at the last report, but we had an ADU, a serious ADU interest within a 150-foot buffer of one of the other ADUs. I'm sorry, a plex interest within the buffer of one of the other duplexes. So, that has materially stopped one additional duplex in town, the buffer. I think the department would say the regulations could be lessened. We definitely didn't get the plex waive that we heard about from the public and members of the bodies who saw the request. But yeah, it's still kind of early. I think we said this at the last report, but we did not see construction slow down for single-family homes during COVID. Different kinds of construction happened because people were staying home. But I do think that this particular use is probably being hampered by the regulations surrounding it.
Councilmember Matt Flaherty asked a follow-up question on what is stopping people from building ADUs and duplexes. Scanlon said that the unknowns about the process might be stopping people before they get started.
With respect to conditional use, obviously it adds more time to the process, but is it the uncertainty that you think drives the deterrent factor of conditional use, that folks don't know whether they'll be approved or not, so they don't want to put the time into it? Or is there another mechanism happening?
I think sorry to cut you off there.
No,
I think it is uncertainty, and I just think it's a general not understanding of planning processes. And so knowing that you have to go through a process, I think does kind of deter people before you even have the opportunity to explain to them what that process really entails, and that if they can meet the requirements, then the board would approve their request. So I also think it's, kind of new, and so maybe that's part of it. But now that we're coming into, 3 years, 4 years since we had the discussion the first time, I think you can seriously look at the regulations and say maybe some of that needs to be changed if we do want to have more.
Councilmember Jim Sims asked Scanlon if making the approval process be a by right permitted use instead of a conditional permitted use would encourage more residents to consider ADUs and plexes. Scanlon shared she thinks that they would probably see more requests if the ordinance was instead a by right permitted use.
I do think it's a barrier. I think by right we would see more interest. I mean, it's a large and it's a large financial investment, as you've said, I mean, single-family houses, the house a block away from where I live, within walking distance of this building, went up for sale last week and got a over asking cash offer the next day for more than $500,000. I mean, like, people are, it's crazy right now. So yeah, you would have to really be invested in wanting to have a duplex. I mean, it is a different type of living style than some people are used to. And so I think there's that, getting used to that difference. But I do think that making it by right could help stimulate having more real viable interest.
Flaherty said that he is interested in changing the regulations after seeing that the concerns city residents had did not come to fruition. He asked Scanlon if she thinks that it would be reasonable to loosen the regulations to enable the building of more accessory dwelling units and plexes.
I think like these are sort of like guardrails that were put in place, like extra precautions as sort of how they were framed, similar to how ADUs were rolled out in 2017. Because some folks in the community certainly were very afraid that New York hedge funds would buy hundreds of properties and tear them all down, and this sort of narrative. Do you feel like the evidence we have after several years demonstrates clearly that those fears were unfounded, and we can proceed to not sort of hinder the process of developing missing middle housing in Bloomington?
Sure. I think the tracking that we've done of the interest that we've received thus far from plexes is primarily from local people. So some local realtors or local developers, local architects, local residents. That is what we've seen thus far. I do think, again, that allowing the use by right with as many restrictions as we felt were appropriate, just because something's by right doesn't mean that the other restrictions, the use-specific standards, would go away, could help us with our challenge of lacking missing middle.
Then Councilmember Dave Rollo reintroduced an ordinance to amend the traffic calming and greenways program.
What this entails is, as I said, to reestablish council participation at the conclusion of the process. But it would behoove us to be involved throughout the process, obviously, at the beginning and at the end, and throughout the process. So I see it as a check and balance. Prior to 2019, it was a given that the council was involved in any permanent alterations of roadways. Recall currently we still are to in some extent. We just approved a series of stop signs, for instance, that in some ways has, I think, much less significance than some of the proposed greenway programs. So these projects can be, let me establish why I think council should be involved. These greenway projects can be very expensive. The proposal for the Hawthorne-Weatherstone Greenway, for instance, is probably in the neighborhood of about $400,000. But staff would know better at this point. And so it is in part a responsibility, I think, of the council, as I said, in terms of its budgetary fiduciary responsibility over some expenditures that are that large. It allows us to evaluate priorities along the way too. We have, for instance, many different possibilities for greenways, for instance. We have areas of the city that are very safe to walk and bike. We have other areas that are not so. And so it allows us to evaluate those and particular projects with respect to priorities.
Assistant Director of Planning and Transportation, Beth Rosenbarger, offered some clarification on the traffic calming and greenways processes.
I want to reiterate that the traffic calming and greenways program does not identify what is or is not a neighborhood greenway in our community. What will be built out as neighborhood greenways was identified through the transportation planning process and adopted via this body into the transportation plan. So when we talk about if something is or is not, that we refer to the transportation plan. And if members of the community or council members representing those members wanted something to not be a neighborhood greenway, the best path to doing that is to amend the transportation plan, which is a document that can be amended. And we're even working on staff amendments to hopefully be bringing at the end of this year or next year. So the Traffic Calming and Greenways program is a process. It has the two processes, the staff-led, which can be staff-led traffic calming, or the staff-led neighborhood greenways process, and the resident-led traffic calming process.
The council voted 4-5 in opposition to the ordinance. The next Bloomington City Council meeting will take place on May 17th. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
I'm at risk of thinking there's just no point in trying.
I'm at risk of looking in the mirror and hating what I see.
I'm at risk of being told not to tell.
But with Girls Inc. in my corner,
I will not be another statistic.
I will fight for myself.
With you in my corner, I will win.
Fuel her fire and she will change the world. Girls Inc.
Welcome back to CATSweek. On May 9th, the Monroe County Council discussed adding a full-time bailiff position for the Monroe County Courts Department. The position replaces the original two-person part-time positions and includes full benefits. Monroe County Circuit Court Judge Mary Ellen Dieckhoff recommended an additional bailiff in the courtroom to increase safety.
If we have a hearing that's highly contentious, or there's a possibility that it's going to get contentious, then we're going to have more than one bailiff in there. For security reasons. There was a hearing on Friday with a special judge. It had to do with a particularly dangerous defendant who was brought by the Department of Corrections. So there were two bailiffs in there at the time and a couple of jail staff. But because the jail staff has their own duties to do with the sheriff, and our bailiffs are responsible for the courtrooms and the security of us in the courtrooms, it's just necessary. And as Lisa said, sometimes we have multiple courts and multiple hearings going on, and we're sharing them with 5 bailiffs.
The Monroe County Courts Department currently has 5 bailiffs for 9 courtrooms, stretching the department thin when bailiffs are needed to move persons if reprimanded by a judge.
In our criminal caseload, that if a person is remanded in the courtroom, a bailiff does have to take them to the court or to the jail, which means that bailiff now has left that courtroom. And we do even remand people in the Curry building next door in Commissioner Raper's. And since they have to actually cross the alleyway, it takes 2 bailiffs if they serve that, or in the probation department.
Dieckhoff said the courts department has had a difficult time filling the part-time bailiff position, but says a full-time position with benefits might encourage residents to apply.
Unfortunately, now it's not so lucky. Nobody wants to. Most of our full-time positions that we post for them come from either retired, say, BPD or Monroe County Jail or the Sheriff's Department, if they want to retire. So we're hoping maybe we can jump on someone who is willing to come back and do that, because they can still draw their pension from either BPD or the Sheriff's Department and come back. So that's what we're hoping for. That's what most of our bailiffs are right now, is from one of those 2 departments, so they're very qualified.
The Monroe County Council passed the motion unanimously, and now it moves to the Courts Department to post a full-time bailiff position. The Monroe County Council also discussed creating the Financial Advisory Committee, which would inform the Monroe County Council about financial implications pertaining to the Monroe County Justice Department and the expansion of the county jail.
At this point, we're thinking that it would consist of 3 council members. The duties are laid out as follows: that we will serve in an advisory role to the council by obtaining key information from local stakeholders to facilitate responsible, informed financial decisions.
The Justice Financial Advisory Committee, or JPAC, would meet bi-weekly and would allow local residents to attend meetings to voice concerns following the county's justice system. Secretary for the Monroe County branch of the NAACP, Gloria Howell, voiced the NAACP's support of the resolution and encouraged the council to pass it.
We feel strongly that the work of community justice must always be done in public and with broad public engagement, inclusion, and transparency. We encourage the County Council as the fiscal body of county government to take lead in continuing this important work in the public eye. Please use your influence and authority to speak up for the underrepresented, for those whose voices are not often heard, and to truly defend the rights of all. Ensure that your allocation of taxpayer dollars reflects these values. We trust and expect you to collaborate and communicate for the common good.
The council did discuss the size limitations of JPAC if it included only 3 Monroe County Council members. Councilmember Marty Hawk offered this proposal.
If you advertise it for an open meeting so that all the council could go if we chose, or listen to it online if we chose, then nobody would feel left out of the conversation. We'd all feel like we had the opportunity to stay up to date with it. And that's, I believe, the way we do PAC, because there's 3 members of PAC, but it is a noticed meeting, or at least it was supposed to be. I suppose it still is. So all members could show up at that meeting because it's a noticed meeting.
The council did vote to pass an amendment to the JPAC resolution to add 12 members along with the 3 county council members. The 12 additional members will have lived and professional experience in Monroe County and are not required to be at every meeting. The Monroe County Council will meet again on June 13th. And we'll have more Cats Week after this message.
For hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the causes to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone, and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
Welcome back to Cats Week. During the May 9th meeting of the Bloomington Board of Public Works, the board heard a resolution to remove a structure within the public right-of-way at 431 East Wiley Street. Transportation technician for the city, Michael Stewart, explained the resolution.
We received a complaint about a structure, a shed that's placed at 431 East Wiley Street. This is within a section of unimproved right-of-way, which is approximately 36 feet wide. The shed is essentially right in the middle of this unimproved right-of-way. Currently, there are no utilities that the engineering department has been able to identify. The shed is placed approximately 15 feet from the edge of the property. Per state code, the Board of Public Works has the ability to order the removal of the shed. So given that engineering department's first approach is to send a letter of request to the property owner asking for the removal of the structure within the right-of-way. That letter was sent on April 5th, 2023, and per the note in that letter, should it not be removed by April 9th, we would be asking for it to be removed from the board. And I believe that's all that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Public Works Director Adam Wason recommended the board not take any formal action and to listen to the parties involved.
We've been having a lot of internal discussions amongst staff about this particular location and the request for the removal of the structure and what the original intent of the right-of-way is, what the current status of the right-of-way is. What I'm going to recommend for this evening is, I know we have some interested parties in the room. We have Mike and the staff report he's given. I'm going to recommend that we not take any formal action tonight, but just hear, allow anyone that wants to offer some comments to enter those into the public record, give staff some more time to really review the whole situation, see what compromises, what alternatives, what exists out there for us to try to figure out. As is stated in one of the letters, I think the shed's been in this particular location for 30-some years. Not that it's permissible by code in the most strict reading of code, but at the same time, there's a lot of history here, and we want to allow anyone that has comment to offer that to the board tonight. But my recommendation is more than likely going to be that we not take any formal action and that we allow some more time for this topic to be discussed.
Stewart elaborated on the request to remove the structure on East Wiley Street.
I reached out to the Planning and Transportation Department, some of their staff members, on how they handle parking on unimproved surfaces. The crux of this issue, as I understand it, is there's one of the neighbors would like to be able to access a boat that is parked in their backyard. According to the UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, vehicles including boats, must be parked on an improved surface. Typically, planning would view just having gravel under that as improvement. The question was, does it need to have a driveway or any other improved right-of-way access to be able to get to it? According to planning staff, when I spoke with them today, that is typically not a requirement. Ultimately, what they'd want to see is a site plan, and I think things get approved or denied on case-by-case, measuring everything up. But typically, no, it would not. Something like an unimproved right-of-way would not hinder the approval of that.
During public comment, the resident of the property in question said the shed has been on the property since the 1980s.
My name's Philip Zook. My wife and I own the property at 431 East Wiley, and we own the shed, the structure that's on the easement to the east of our property. We have lived at that location since the mid-'80s. The shed has been on that location since the mid-'80s, approximately 40 years. The grassed easement that goes to the alley from the Wiley Street south has been maintained by us. We've maintained a pathway for people going through from First Street to Wiley. Even though for them to exit, they have to come up on our property. This has never been an issue. As far as it goes for the shed and maintenance of the shed, we're willing to move the shed. We're unwilling to see that grass easement that hasn't been driven on in 40 years be driven on. Driving from First Street towards Wiley, it's the lower part of the property. I submitted some pictures. I don't know whether those have been made available to you or not. But you see there's a collection of considerable amount of water down in that area. It's just our feeling that any sort of driving on the grassed area, any sort of parking in that area is just going to continue to create a deterioration of the property. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. But as I said, we'd be more than willing to move the shed if we understand it's on city property. We just would hate to see that property deteriorate by a vehicle being driven on it or vehicles parked down in that area.
A neighboring resident requested that the shed be moved by about 6 feet, saying that she's unable to access the back of her property as a result of the structure.
Our property abuts this area of question, and we are unable to access the back of our property currently. And I have a sunfish sailboat, which is about 18 feet long, very light, but the trailer is an older one. It's a little bit heavy, so we can't manually negotiate it. So in order to get it out in a flat area, we would have to go around the shed onto the Shook's property, and we don't want to do that, so we asked that they move the shed. So I'm surprised that I heard he should move it, because that's all we would like, is just to have it moved. We don't require any, or we're not asking for any improvements on that, any upgrades, any type of change to that access. We have a couple of vehicles that I would just back in and grab the boat and take it out and take it back. It's not going to be, we don't have any need to park back there. We just need to be able to get in and out to the gravel pad or whatever where we're going to have the boat. So it seems like the traffic would be minimal, and we've been there about 4 years, I think now, and really beautified the property. It had been vacant for a long time, and we intend to keep it really beautiful and not inconvenience anyone. But so if it were moved, I think 10 feet, is that right? About 10 feet over? If it were moved even 10 feet, that would probably be fine.
Public Works Director Adam Wason asked for clarification on how the nearby resident would use the public right-of-way if the structure were removed.
Would your intention to be to drive vehicles on the grass and in the areas that do collect the water?
Actually,
or would you be able to, or would you be, would you be putting vehicles on that unimproved right of way, or would you be pulling the boat to it and then maneuvering it back?
Say that again?
I'm trying to just figure out if you're going to actually have to drive vehicles regularly on the grass area that's unimproved, or if you'll be just pulling up to that area and then manually moving the boat back to where you
we don't care either way. I mean, if we could park the boat on the, I'm going to call it an alley. I know that's not the correct term, but
right.
You know that
Unimproved
area.
right away.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be happy to leave the boat there and have our little pad there, and just zoom in and not even park the truck there. It's just we have parking in the front, but we can't get down to the back. So either that or just driving over that, and it would probably be a total of, I don't know, maybe a dozen times a year. Very minimal if we did drive across that, and we could put gravel on it too if that would help.
Thank you.
Okay, so was I clear about the
Yes,
two
yeah,
things?
I was trying to figure out if the vehicle, if a car would actually have to be on the grass, unimproved right-of-way, or if you would just be manually moving the boat trailer with human power in that area.
Well, no,
Okay.
we couldn't manually.
Got it.
It's too heavy because
Got it.
I'm the main sailor in the family, so I would be doing it by myself.
Got it.
So I
That's
need
what
to
I was
back up the trailer, hook it onto the boat, and then take it out. But I don't care where that is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I don't know if I park in the alley and get used to it and the Shooks leave, then I won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
So we don't.
What I'm going to suggest to the board is that we do table this for the evening. I'll commit to myself going out more. I'd be happy to meet you on site, really truly understand exactly where we're talking about, see what compromises could possibly exist here. It is not our intent. I don't know that you'll receive a public works support to the board to drive vehicles in that low area or not. I really want to come out and see exactly how you would need to maneuver before I'd be comfortable making a recommendation to the board.
The board voted unanimously to table the item for a future meeting in order to investigate the resolution further. The Board of Public Works will meet again on May 23rd. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.